Uh, no more iPad fun time for us. Looks like we're making a new iPhone video. Ta-da! Okay, so we have, what is this? iPhone 4, no SIM card. This is the iPhone 4 announced on the WWDC keynote in June of 2010. Boring. Skip. iPhone reviews, right? Talk about an old iPhone. It's old, it's unsupported, it's small. This is tiny. And yeah, this is basically what every iPhone review is, right? Even I've made them in the past, and I mean, what else is there to say about an old iPhone, right? Well, that's where today's video is going to be a little bit interesting because, well, we're coming up with this on the spot, and we're going to try and talk about, cool stuff. Or, if we have to, we can always resort back to the iPad and make some more music, right? Let's get this out of the way real quick. I'm sure you guys are all wondering about this. What's the deal with this screen protector on this iPad? This is actually just like that plastic protective film on an actual screen protector. Instead of throwing it away, I just put it on here. I mean, it looks absolutely terrible on camera, but it's really not that bad in person. Does it actually do its job? Maybe. It's just plastic, but in the shape of an iPad screen. That's about it, basically. Why don't I get an actual screen protector? Well, today's video is not the topic of a screen protector, so we're just going to put this off to the side. And no, this is not a Dank Pods ripoff. He has a green iPad too on the back side. This is an iPad 1 on the front side. There's absolutely no resemblance to a Dank Pods video whatsoever. See, it's not green. And the Apple logo is actually in portrait mode. Okay, but honestly, if you have an old iPhone, what are you going to do with it? We're up to the iPhone 15 now, and this is the iPhone 4. The one advantage, at least from cosmetics, is that this design is still, albeit very smudgy, a timeless classic. The fact that this has a comfortable square housing is something that Apple has been trying to return back to. But there's something about the iPhone 4 series, there is no alternative to this. It's just the iPhone 4, and that's what makes it so awesome. How about we clean up our act here and actually wipe down this iPhone? With it being 13 years old at this point, and at the newest, maybe 10 or 11 if you have a later revision, most of the time it's not going to be 100% cosmetically perfect unless you kept it in that condition, depending on how you used it. There is an advantage to iPhones that are not in great cosmetic shape because, well, if something happens to it, I mean, this thing is already covered in scratches, but that really doesn't affect it at all. The display still works, touch still works. I think you get the idea, right? I mean, I really don't have to explain this here. This does actually still work, even though it looks terrible. But on the backside, you'd never be able to tell, right? There's literally only two scratches, or two big scratches, and just a couple of micro scratches on the back. But even though these are clunkers, Cash for Clunkers edition of the iPhone, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're completely obsolete. Sure, carriers are not even supporting some of them, but as you saw, web browsing still works on this, albeit not 100% perfect, but it does still work. Not to mention that, well, it looks a little bit more modern than you were probably expecting, because I actually jailbroke this iPhone, and you can do cool things like install custom skins and tweaks. It's got a headphone jack. Even though the camera is not exactly something you'd see on a modern smartphone, I mean, it still takes pictures and you've still got an LED flash. But I think the real advantage to these older devices, obviously you can run older apps on these 32-bit only apps that may not even exist on the App Store anymore. But the other advantage is, depending on how much storage you have, these make excellent iPods. Now, obviously, you could get an actual iPod Touch or an iPod Classic, modify those. Even, just as a standalone device, it's got a speaker. Depending on the model, it's got 30 pin, which is actually really handy, especially for older accessories. You can actually still put a decent amount of songs on here. And, because these are clunkers, you could get one iPhone to have one specific genre of music, another for another genre, or maybe podcasts or audiobooks or whatever's more your thing for listening, and it'll actually be used instead of it just staying in a junk drawer or something. I think the term clunkers is actually pretty good for something like this because I don't think this is exactly economically viable to repair. But if you're just doing this for fun, or if you're doing it, in my case, making a video on YouTube, if you have one that's broken, it's probably worth fixing if you actually have a use for it. Now, obviously, streaming services and things like that, sure, more convenient and whatnot, but honestly, I've been using this device a lot as a standalone media player, especially with the 30 pin, because I've got some accessories that can go with this, and it hasn't given me any problems. This is in dark mode because I have a custom system-wide tweak to enable dark mode, and funny enough, on my modern devices that actually natively support dark mode, I don't have it on. I actually prefer it on this device. If you want to play NSYNC for some reason. You've also got lyrics, but it looks like the dark mode tweak is kind of negatively affecting that. And we will not be playing this because of copyright. But obviously, you get the point. You've also got the old style switcher, the old style control center. Sure, they may be a clunker compared to a modern device. It's still old iOS, and in that way, it's kind of become like a time capsule of devices in the past. It's just fun to use. Sure, it's not a daily driver unless you really want to, unless you have a lot of storage. You optimize this as much as possible, such as downgrading the iOS. Jailbreaking is a necessity at this point. You could make it a daily driver if you really wanted to. But even as a secondary or just a standalone media player, they still make fantastic devices. I mean, where else are you going to get the convenience of, well, in this case, I'm saying it's convenient for me, but a 30 pin, a built-in speaker, a headphone jack, the ability to stream to Bluetooth and Wi-Fi devices, and at the same time having a high-resolution Retina display. This is 2010 technology, and if you think about it, partly 2009 as well, and it still looks phenomenal. This camera is still pretty decent considering how old it is, and if it was a 4S, it would be even better. Honestly, for a device of this age, it still has a lot of capabilities. As of right now, it's still really easy to get a hold of one of these because, well, like I said, it's a clunker, but you're not exactly going to get a lot of cash for it. So it's not even worth trading it in because most of the time a device of this age, they probably won't give you anything. It's not like a CRT television where they're going to charge you to take it. At the same time, you might as well just get some more use out of this. At the very least, you could always give it to someone else who has a use for it. But I encourage you to have some fun with an older iPhone. Try out some old apps and games. And at the very least, if you've got a music collection or if you want to switch over to a music collection from streaming, an old iPhone is an excellent option to get into. Okay, I think that covers it. We can check that off. And now we're back to the iPad. Okay, but actually, if anyone is wondering what I'm actually using on this iPad here, it's a program known as ReBirth specifically ReBirth for iPad. ReBirth was also available on the iPhone, but it got discontinued in 2013, and the iPad version actually got discontinued in 2017. And the reason for that is due to some legal issues, so we just lost our hard work with that too in there. I'm not going to tell you how to get this software unless you actually bought it back in the day. You can go to the App Store and look at your purchase tab, but if you want to get this and you did not buy it due to legal reasons, I'm not going to get in depth with that. But I will say, if you know how to jailbreak, then I'm pretty sure you can find your own way on how to get the IPA onto here. If you haven't played around with ReBirth, this is actually really fun software to use. It's more easily accessible to get on an older Macintosh, but if you know your way around iOS jailbreaking, then like I said, I'm pretty sure you can find your own way on how to get this here. I will also not be making a tutorial on this, but I do plan on actually looking at this in the future. How does this tie in with the iPhone review? It doesn't really, but I just wanted an excuse to play with the software. And if you haven't heard the default song, there's actually a bunch of different built-in songs. The default one is actually a classic 90s work of art, I guess. That's not actually how the song goes. I'm just messing around with the patterns here. But, I mean, classic 90s, right on your 2010 era device, which is honestly really cool. And it's actually a really great use for the iPad 1 here. And why did this transition to an iPad 1 review? Well, it's not. It's still, I'm still going to call it a generic iPhone 4 review, mainly just because it's funny. But the iPad 1, honestly, in some ways, it's better than the iPad 2 because it's maxed out at 5.1.1, at least for the iOS version. But that doesn't mean it's terrible. We've still got the built-in YouTube app, and I can look up the jailbreak tutorial I made on this. The thumbnail with the iPad right there, this very iPad. And we can even go ahead and click on the video and watch. Check it out. 3 years ago, that's crazy. I can actually play this because, it's my video, but the glare on this is pretty terrible. Even without the screen protector, it's still a reflective display, so there's not much I can really do. But if we want to see the same iPad in action here, iPadception, Cydia, YouTube, and the tube fixer is still working to this day. Okay, now back to ReBirth. By the way, this is one that I actually made. It's not necessarily a song, I was just messing around with the patterns, but I want to try and get better at ReBirth because it's honestly a fun piece of software to use. And I think that's where we're going to end off today's video. Honestly, the iPad overshadowed the entire iPhone review. But if you enjoyed today's video or this style of content, leave a thumbs up, leave a comment if you want to see something in particular, and if you want to see more of this in the future, then consider subscribing so we can jam out with ReBirth once again, a piece of 90s software running on 2010 hardware. I told you I don't really have a certain idea for today's video, but this is what we got. I'm just going to stick with it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.